Hello, welcome back, Recapped Mystery here. Today, I'm going to explain a French horror thriller film called Flight Plan. Watch out and take care. Kyle Pratt is having a difficult night. Kyle is a widowed American aircraft engineer who recently lost her husband in Berlin. She must fly her husband's body to the United States with her 4-year-old daughter, Julia. Kyle takes medicines recommended by her doctor to aid her with her anxiousness. It is snowing outside the next morning, and a cab is waiting for them to take them to the airport. Kyle loses Julia at the airport, and she panics. She encounters strangers, couples, foreigners, and grown-ups, but no one was kid-sized. She takes another turn. Julia is over by the sundries stand. She warns her angrily not to venture around without her permission. Kyle and Julia will shortly board a jet designed by Kyle. They're the first people to enter the cabin. Julia peers out the window. Then she steams that window with her breath and paints a tiny, awkward heart in the steam with her finger. Kyle then falls asleep. When she wakes up from her snooze, she notices Julia has vanished from her seat. Kyle tries to ask other passengers, but no one remembers seeing her. Julia may be playing with youngsters her age, according to a flight attendant. Kyle walks down the aisle, looking for Julia, but she is nowhere to be seen. Kyle continues to gaze around with a growing sense of discomfort. She double-checks their row, where they'd slept out. She looks beneath the blanket and discovers the one-armed bear, but there was no Julia. That's strange. Julia wouldn't leave the house without her bear. Stephanie, a flight attendant, is then contacted to assist her in locating Julia. Stephanie agrees to assist her and announces a missing child. However, Stephanie informs her, much to her amazement, that there is no record of her daughter boarding the flight. Kyle is perplexed. She is certain her daughter was present, so she attempts to prove it by displaying her boarding card. Kyle, on the other hand, is unable to locate Julia's boarding pass. She also discovers that her daughter's rucksack is missing from the overhead bin, which is impossible because Julia isn't tall enough to reach up here on her own. When a sky marshal, Gene Carson, notices this circumstance, he begins to monitor her while she searches for her kid. Kyle requests to meet Captain Marcus Rich in order to enlist his assistance in the search for her daughter. The pilot inquires about Kyle's current medicine after learning that there is no record of her daughter boarding the flight. Kyle claims she was taking sleeping medications to relieve anxiety caused by her husband's death. Kyle goes on to say that her husband died 6 days ago after falling from their roof, which she refuses to accept was suicide. The captain and the other crew members assume Kyle has become deranged as a result of her husband's death and has fantasized about bringing her daughter aboard. Kyle insists on searching for Julia from head to toe. Captain Rich grudgingly agrees and directs the crew to conduct a thorough search. The cabin's lights are turned on. All passengers are instructed not to leave their seats. Stephanie goes down to the avionics section and looks about, but there are no 4-year-old females there. Pratt notices an Egyptian while she is seeking. She approaches him because she recognizes him from somewhere. She tries to recall something, but her mind is too jumbled right now. Kyle then requests that the captain hunt for Julia in the cargo hold. Captain Rich refuses, stating furiously that there are hundreds of passengers on this flight who are not receiving any attention at the moment because all flight attendants are busy searching for a child who none of them think was ever on board. Kyle isn't having it. She then dashes over to the Egyptian. She accuses the man of kidnapping her daughter, after seeing him last night, peeking into her daughter's bedroom. The man is irritated at being accused. He then displays proof of receipt from the hotel where he stayed, which is not near her flat. Then there's mayhem. Kyle coerces the man into confessing, and they fight. Carson, who is tired of her antics, claims that her husband's death makes more sense today. After only a few hours with her, he is ready to jump. Captain Marcus soon receives word from the hospital in Berlin that Julia was with her father when he fell off the roof and died of internal injuries. The staff now feel she is hallucinating. Kyle vehemently denies it. She is certain Julia is still alive and on the plane. Carson now believes Kyle is a threat because she made up such a narrative, so he ties her and keeps her in her seat. Lisa, a therapist, approaches Kyle and attempts to console her, making Kyle question her own sanity. She is finally coming to terms with her daughter's loss. She does, however, Note that the heart Julia drew earlier on the window next to her seat is real. Kyle grows increasingly certain that something strange is happening. She then persuades the therapist to allow her to use the loo. Instead, she climbs into the top compartment and tampers with the aircraft's electronics, deploying the oxygen masks and disrupting illumination. All passengers and crews begin to panic, but Carson realizes that Kyle is to blame. She takes advantage of the confusion to take a dumbwaiter to the lower freight deck. She discovers her husband's coffin there. She opens David's casket, expecting to see Julia inside, but only finds her husband's body. There is nothing else. Carson locates her, arrests her, and leads her back, explaining that the airplane is making an emergency stopover at Goose Bay Airport, where she will be arrested. One of the passengers begins to applaud as she is led to her seat. The deck is filled with applause. Others, including the Egyptian, are staring at her. Kyle walks to the back row, where she pauses and sits. Kyle makes one last plea to Carson to search the plane upon arrival. Carson thinks for a while before approaching the captain. Instead of communicating with the captain, he sneaks down to the cargo deck. He removes 2 explosives and a detonator from David's, Kyle's spouse, casket. He then descends to the avionics area and attaches the explosives to the platform's side, uncovering Julia, who is asleep. Carson is shown to be the brains behind all of this at this point. Carson and Stephanie planned to hijack the plane for a $50 million ransom and implicate Kyle because of her knowledge of the jet. They kidnapped Julia to force Kyle to open the casket containing the explosives and detonator. Carson informs the captain that Kyle is a hijacker and threatens to blow up the plane if the airline does not transfer $50 million into a bank account. Carson then informs an alarmed Stephanie that he wants to blow up the plane, killing Julia while she is unconscious, and leaving Kyle dead with the detonator in her hand. Kyle still couldn't believe what had happened. She anxiously looks out the window as the jet prepares to land. Because of the emergency landing, other passengers are perplexed. The passengers disembark the aircraft after landing. Kyle confronts the captain as he is leaving, and the captain angrily states that the ransom has been paid. Kyle is perplexed by this. Soon, she realizes that it is all Carson's fault. He takes advantage of the circumstance to distort the truth and portray Kyle as a terrorist. Realizing this, Kyle decides to play the role of hijacker, ordering Carson to stay aboard and the crew to evacuate. Carson hesitates, but realizes that if he refuses, it will be obvious that the charade is his. Kyle knocks Carson unconscious with a fire extinguisher as soon as the plane's door closes, binds him to a rail, and takes the detonator from his pocket. Stephanie emerges from hiding. Carson is able to regain consciousness. He pursues Kyle, shooting at her until she locks herself in the cockpit. To trick him, she unlocks a hatch door to the plane's attic and throws out a binder. Carson walks away after hearing the upstairs thud. Kyle leaves and runs into a guilt-ridden Stephanie. She hits her, causing her to panic and flee the plane. Kyle continues her search for her daughter to the avionics, where she finds Julian unconscious. She hugs and carries her right away. Carson quickly follows, revealing that he murdered her husband in order to carry explosives inside his casket, knowing that it would not be checked at the checkpoint. Kyle promptly pulls Julia inside the aircraft's non-combustible hold, where Carson shoots at her as she locks the door. She detonates the bombs, exploding the plane and killing Carson, with the non-combustible walls of the hold protecting them. The passengers and crew are stunned when they witness the explosion. Kyle then appears, accompanied by her daughter. As Kyle carries her daughter out onto the tarmac, the passengers are taken aback when they realize she has been speaking the truth the entire time. Captain Rich approaches Kyle in the airport terminal the next morning and apologizes for his skepticism. Stephanie is carried away in handcuffs by the FBI, who informs them that the Berlin mortuary director has also been arrested. Kyle transports Julia past a swarm of passengers who have realized the truth. Everyone is stunned and feels guilty for not believing her. Julia wakes up and sleepily says, "Are we there yet?" as they prepare to leave before placing her daughter into a van. As an expression of respect and forgiveness, the Egyptian passenger assists in picking up her suitcase in the final scene. That is the conclusion of the film Flight Plan. Please subscribe to assist the channel, turn on notification and leave a like. Thank you for taking the time to watch. See you again soon.